Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by C.G. Part 3, Chapter 19. Luo was away on his month's leave. I enjoyed being on my own occasionally to do whatever I pleased, to eat what I wanted when I felt like it. Indeed, I would have had a wonderful time being the sole lord and master of our house on stilts, if Luo hadn't entrusted me with a delicate mission on the eve of his departure. "I want you to do me a favor," he had said conspiratorially. "While I'm away, would you guard the little seamstress for me?" He said she had a lot of admirers on the mountain, including a fair number of city youths, and that during his month's absence they would make a beeline for the tailor's workshop in a bid to win her favor. "You mustn't forget," he admonished, "that she's the #1 beauty on the phoenix of the sky." My task was to spend as much time as I could at her side, to serve as the guardian of her affections, so to speak. I was to prevent any contenders from insinuating themselves into her private life, from sneaking into a domain to which only Luo, my beloved commander, was rightfully entitled. I was surprised and flattered by his request and promised to do as he instructed. How blindly Luo entrusted me! Asking this of me at the last minute was like giving me a priceless treasure for safekeeping, without it even entering his head that I might make off with it myself. At the time, my sole preoccupation was to honor the faith he had in me. I pictured myself at the head of a routed army, charged with escorting the young wife of my bosom friend, the commander-in-chief, across a vast, bleak desert. Armed with pistol and machine gun, I'd stand guard every night over the tent in which the gracious lady slept, and I'd ward off the horrible savages lusting after her flesh while their eyes, burning with desire, flashed in the dark. After 1 month of the most excruciating hardships, sandstorms, shortages of food and water, soldiers beginning to mutiny, we'd reached the end of the desert, and just as the young lady ran to her beloved, just as she and my friend fell into each other's arms at last, I'd faint from exhaustion and thirst on the crest of the last sand dune. And so, from the day Luo left the village to visit his mother in the city, I assumed the role of undercover agent. Each morning I headed down the mountainside to the village where the little seamstress lived. My look was steely and my pace brisk, as befitting a secret agent with a mission. Autumn had arrived, and the secret agent bowled along the mountain path like a vessel in full sail. The path skirted the village where Four Eyes had been lodged and then made a northbound turn, and the secret agent had to struggle against heavy winds, hunched over, head bowed, like an indefatigable mountaineer. Upon reaching the perilous ridge with a yawning chasm on either side, he would slow his pace a little, without, however, having to crouch down and crawl on his hands and knees. Day after day he conquered his vertigo. He wavered only slightly as he advanced and fastened his gaze on the cold, beady eyes of the red-beaked raven, which was perched, as always, on top of the shoulder at the other end of the crossing. Misplacing just 1 step would mean losing his footing altogether, which would send the tightrope walker crashing to his death on the bottom of either the left chasm or the right. Did our undercover agent address the raven? Did he offer it a crust of bread? I don't suppose he did. He was certainly perturbed by the bird's cool and passive gaze, and the image of it did not fade from his memory until many years later. Such aloofness, he felt, was a mark of the supernatural, but he was not deterred. His mind was made up, and he would accomplish his mission. It's important to note that the bamboo hod, formerly carried by Luo, now rested on the back of our secret agent. As usual, it contained, safely stashed under leaves, vegetables, rice stalks, or maize cobs, a novel by Balzac, translated by Foulet. Some mornings, when the clouds hung low in the sky, you would have sworn it was a bamboo hod and not a man ascending the path and vanishing into the gray mist. The little seamstress was not aware that she was under surveillance. To her, I was merely a substitute reader. I couldn't help noticing that she enjoyed listening to me. She even seemed to appreciate my way of reading the story more than my predecessors. Reading aloud whole pages word for word struck me as pretty boring, so I decided to take a different approach. I would start by reading a couple of pages or a short chapter while she did her work on the sewing machine. Then, after allowing some time for it to sink in, I would ask her what she thought would happen next. Once she had answered my question, I would tell her what it said in the book, almost paragraph by paragraph. I couldn't resist taking slight liberties, adding bits here and there by way of a personal touch to make the story more interesting to her. When I felt good old Balzac was running out of steam, I would contribute little inventions of my own, or even insert whole scenes from another novel. It is time to dwell for a moment on the life led by the founder of this tailoring dynasty, the master of the workshop. Between visits to clients in the surrounding villages, the old tailor would spend some time at home, although quite often he would have to leave again after 2 or 3 days. He was soon accustomed to my daily attendance at his house. What's more, the swarm of suitors, pretending to be customers, were kept at bay by his presence, and he became a trusty accomplice to my secret mission. He hadn't forgotten the 9 nights he had spent at our house on stilts, listening to the Count of Monte Cristo. The experience was repeated in his own home. Not quite so spellbound, perhaps, but still eager, he listened to some more Balzac. Cousin Pons this time, a rather dark tale. By chance, he was at home for 3 nights in a row, at the point where Cibot the tailor, a minor character in the book, is kept in suspense by Remonoc, the scrap iron merchant. Never had a secret agent carried out his mission with more dedication. Between the chapters of Cousin Pons, I would volunteer to do chores about the house. It was I, for instance, who would take 2 large wooden buckets to the communal well to replenish the household reservoir. And quite often I did the cooking, too. I took great pleasure in these humble tasks, cleaning vegetables and cutting meat with the fastidiousness of a true chef. I would chop wood with a blunt hatchet, arrange the logs with care to ensure that they would burn properly. When the fire threatened to go out, which was often, I had no qualms about crouching down in clouds of suffocating smoke to blow on the embers with adolescent impatience. The days sped by. It was not long before I took it upon myself, out of a sense of courtesy and respect for womanhood that I had learned from Balzac, to relieve the little seamstress of her laundering duties. And whenever she was up to her eyes in work, I would brave the cold of approaching winter and go down to the stream to wash clothes. This voluntary domestication on my part not only softened my temperament, but also gave me more intimate access to the female realm. Balsam, does that ring a bell? It's a common plant you find in florist shops or growing in window boxes. The blooms are sometimes yellow, but more often crimson, and ripen into fat berries which burst open at the slightest touch, releasing a spray of seeds. The balsam flower was the imperial emblem of Phoenix Mountain, for in the shape of its showy petals and spur one can see the head, wings, feet, and even the tail, feathers of that mythical bird. One late afternoon, the light was already fading, we found ourselves alone in the privacy of the kitchen. Sheltered from curious eyes, the secret agent assumed yet another identity. Already a storyteller, cook, and laundryman, the factotum now became a manicurist as well. After rinsing the little seamstress's fingers in a wooden basin, he lovingly applied the thick juice of crushed balsam flowers to each of her nails in turn. Her hands bore no resemblance to those of a peasant, for they were not gnarled by field work. There was a pink scar on the middle of her right hand, no doubt from the snake bite she had received in the mountain pool. "Where did you learn all this girlish stuff?" the little seamstress asked. "From my mother. According to her, if you leave the rags I have wrapped round your fingertips on overnight, you'll find your nails stained bright red, as if you've varnished them." "How long will they stay red?" "10 days or so." I longed to ask if I might kiss her red nails when I returned the next day, as a reward for my artistic endeavor, but the pink scar on her finger brought me down to earth with a thud. I reminded myself of the prohibitions arising from my gallant commitment to my friend and commander. That evening, when I left her house with Cousin Pons safely secreted in my bamboo hod, I was made keenly aware of the jealousy gnawing at the hearts of the local bachelors. Hardly had I set out along the path than I noticed a crowd of about 15 yokels gathering behind my back and following me in silence. Glancing over my shoulder, I was taken aback by the hostility of their young faces. I quickened my pace. The silence was broken by a jeering voice behind my back, exaggerating the city accent. "Please, little seamstress, let me wash your clothes." I blushed and I turned my head to see who was parodying me. It was the village cripple, the eldest in the group. He was brandishing a catapult. I decided to ignore the affront and proceeded on my way while the group came closer, jostling me and chanting the cripple's taunt amid roars of aggressive, sneering laughter. Their mockery grew more savage until one of them stabbed his finger at me, shouting the ultimate insult. "Dirty dog! So you like washing her panties, huh?" I was shocked. How had they found out? I couldn't utter another word nor hide my embarrassment because I had in fact washed her underwear on one occasion. The cripple stepped out in front of me, barring my way. He stripped off his trousers and then his underpants, exposing his fleshy, flaccid private parts. "Here, take them. You can wash mine too," he jeered. An obscene grin spread over his face, which was contorted with excitement. He held up the grimy, stained underpants and waved them triumphantly over his head. I racked my brains for something to say, but I was so enraged, so utterly stunned that I couldn't come up with a suitably damning imprecation. I was shaking all over and close to tears. I have only a vague memory of what happened next, but I do know that I braced myself and swung my hod at the cripple. I wanted to strike him in the face, but he managed to dodge the blow, which landed on his right shoulder. In the ensuing scuffle, I was very quickly brought to my knees, with two young thugs holding me down. My hod slipped from my grasp and rolled over the ground, spilling the contents. The 2 eggs I had wrapped in the cabbage leaf had broken and were leaking onto the cover of Cousin Pond's. The book lay in the dust for all to see. A hush descended. Although illiterate, my tormentors, or rather the little seamstress's swarm of disappointed suitors, were flabbergasted by the sight of this recondite object, a book. They all crowded round for a closer look. All except the 2 holding me fast, that is. The bare-bottomed cripple sank onto his haunches and opened the book at the frontispiece. He stared at the black and white portrait of Balzac wearing a long beard and silvery mustache. "Is that Karl Marx?" someone asked the cripple. "You should know, you've traveled more than us." The cripple did not reply at once. "Or is it Lenin?" another yokel asked. "Or Stalin without his uniform?" Taking advantage of the general confusion, I wrenched myself free from my keeper's grasp, and with a mighty shove, I parted the crowd and lunged at my book, yelling, "Don't touch!" as if it were an explosive device about to go off. Before the cripple had time to realize what was happening, I snatched the book from his hands and made a run for it. A volley of stones and jibes followed in my wake. "Filthy panty washer! Coward! We'll give you some re-education, all right. Just you wait!" A missile from their catapult struck me on my left ear. I felt a stab of pain and suddenly lost my hearing on that side. I reached up to touch my ear, and my fingers came away dripping with blood. Behind me, the insults grew louder and more obscene. The baying voices bounced off the rocky cliffs and resounded in the valleys, their tone becoming increasingly menacing, as if they were preparing for a fresh assault or even a lynching. Eventually, the noise died down, and silence reigned once more. On his way home that evening, the injured secret agent decided ruefully that his mission would be impossible to accomplish. That night seemed never-ending. The house on stilts seemed lonelier, bleaker, more damp-ridden than ever. The smell of desolation hung in the air. It was an unmistakable smell, cold, rancid, moist. You would have sworn the place had been deserted for a long time. In an attempt to forget the pain in my left ear, I settled down to reread my favorite novel, Jean Christophe. I had lit several oil lamps for consolation, but even their reeking flames did not dispel the oppressive smell, and my gloom deepened. My ear had stopped bleeding, but it was bruised and swollen, and the pain was so severe that I found it impossible to concentrate on my book. When I raised my hand gingerly to touch the bruise, I was flooded with rage all over again. What a night! I remember it vividly, but even after all these years, I still don't wholly understand my reaction. All through the night, the pain in my ear kept me awake and thrashing about on my bed, which seemed strewn with needles. Instead of thinking up ways to avenge myself, for instance by chopping off the cripple's ears, I kept imagining that I was being attacked anew by the same gang of yokels. I pictured myself being tied to a tree while they crowded round punching me and torturing me. The last rays of the setting sun glinted off the blade of a knife, which was being brandished by the cripple. It was unlike the traditional butcher's knife, for its blade was strangely long and pointed. The cripple ran his fingers along the blade, caressing it, then raised the knife and sliced off my left ear in one fell swoop, without a sound. My ear dropped to the ground and bounced, while my assailant wiped the blood off the long blade. I was saved from further torment by the arrival of the little seamstress, weeping profusely. The gang fled. Then I imagined myself being untied by the mountain girl with her crimson balsam-stained nails. She allowed me to take her fingers in my mouth and to lick them lovingly. How sweet the taste was! The thick balsam juice coating her glossy nails gave off a musky fragrance, which roused my carnal instincts. Moistened by my saliva, the crimson dye blazed even more brightly, and then, like an erupting volcano, it softened and liquefied into a flow of hissing, red-hot lava sliding over my tongue, overflowing my lips. Once unleashed, the lava rolled down my chin, forming rivulets on my bruised shoulders, lingering on the flat stretch of my chest, circling my nipples, snaking down towards my waist, pausing at my navel before entering me and meandering through my veins and entrails, licking and probing its way to the seat of my manhood where the blood boiled, anarchic and self-willed, in total disregard of the tight restrictions which the secret agent had so mistakenly imposed upon himself. The last oil lamp flickered and died for lack of fuel, leaving the secret agent lying face down on his bed, where he abandoned himself in the dark to a betrayal that left his pants sticky. The luminous hands of the alarm clock indicated midnight.